So I figured it would be helpful if you kind of knew where I was coming from and where I work with. I work for an unusual organization called Ulupono Initiative, and we are actually a Hawaii-based impact investment firm. So what does that actually mean? Is that we make nonprofit and for-profit investments in the state's long-term self-sufficiency. And so we do this in a few different topics. We do this in local food. We do it in water and waste management. We do a lot of work in renewable energy. And then sort of as like an added strategy outside of that, we do that in the transportation space. And we've been around for about 10 years. We are not what I would say is a very common organization. I will tell you that. You will not find a lot of us on the ground. But that's kind of part of the fun, frankly, of my job. And you know, I think sort of understanding that they had kind of come from a business perspective, and when they started to dive into transportation issues, a lot of our history is actually on the electrification of transportation. But what sort of becomes really apparent from that space is that electrifying vehicles will kind of only get you so far if you're talking about reducing fuel use. You know, it does a lot, but you know, you then have to also have like a larger grid and a lot more solar power and a lot more renewable power in order for us to kind of meet these larger, big, lofty climate goals. And so you can't just do it with electrification. And this is sort of true everywhere. So I don't want you to think Hawaii is somehow unusual, or even maybe some of the other island communities that y'all are in. It's definitely something that is present across the board. We at least right now within like the current technical constraints. So that's actually why I got hired. And you can see what I look like when I get super gussied up with makeup and everything else. It's a little bit different look. But I got hired because my expertise is really in transportation planning. But I think more importantly, it's actually using like transportation policy and planning to advance different communities' goals and visions. So it's sort of like, what's the end result? And if that's like the one thing you take from this presentation, I will like consider it a win, is that transportation planning, it's not about like the network necessarily, it's what people can do with it, right? Transportation isn't like direct demand. It's not like an apple that you're selling. It's something that you do and you use to access other places. And so, you know, it can change and it can be different, and it's not, and so trying to figure out like what's the right type of transportation set of options and networks is kind of part of the planning process, is asking those types of questions. And my background has been in that for the past 15 to 20 years. I have worked all over the United States. I think last count, I was at like 15 or 16 states I'd worked in, all the way from like local government work, all the way up to the federal government and a lot of the agencies that work on these issues. So I'm pretty much a generalist within this space. And then I've worked for, all other types of related policy organizations, advocacy groups. I've worked with nonprofits, and even was a consultant for a long time as well. So this is when we switch to Mentimeter, right? We're going to try this?
Yes,
okay.
We're going to try this. So I'm going to put in a link, everyone, in the chat from Mentimeter, which we've all used, right? So if you click on that, and I'm going to switch to the Mentimeter. So Katie has a question to everyone, just to get to know you better. Is, you know, so her question is, what is the one thing you did last year that you never thought you would do? And actually, Katie, for me to do this, I'm gonna have to steal your screen for a few minutes.
That's fine. We can lobby back and forth. Okay, yes. So
I've stopped yours. I'm gonna switch to this one, and you should be able to see it too.
Yep.
And so that is the prompt. And so you see these little hearts here. Those are people that are logged in. So currently there's only 2 people in here.
And I may be one of them.
Oh, 4. So now there's 4. So the number is growing. And I am going to advance the slide. So I'm going to wait for a little bit more people to come in till I switch to the next slide, which will prompt you. So 7. So Katie, do you see there's like these little hearts here?
Yeah.
Okay, so there's seven people on it. Hopefully more will join. But what I can do is I'm gonna, in 3 seconds, go to the next slide, and there's gonna be kind of like the flowing sort of bubbles that we did once of people's responses. So I'm gonna slip here. Okay, so hopefully people will get a chance to write in things. So one student wrote fully online school, use Zoom. No in-person school. So a lot of school on people's thoughts here. Any other responses? Wear a mask, homeschool my kids. I think
That would be mine.
that would
I'm
be
pretty
you.
sure, well, maybe not, but the folks are not necessarily doing that, but I'll put that on this.
Okay, I'm not sure if you wrote that.
So lots of school and Zoom. Did anybody take up any fun hobbies?
Homeschooling.
Or is it all homeschool or schooling
Online
all the
school.
time? Yeah. You're completely indoctrinated into Zooming, huh? So.
Well, apparently one person was eating a lot, so that is their
I mean, it happens. Yeah.
reading.
Yeah.
All right. Lockdown, having a political debate with my family.
Oh, interesting. We're a noisy group in my family. We have those all the time. That was not something that was transformed by the last year.
All right, so I'm gonna start the 1 minute countdown here, right? So there's a counter here. So this is basically gonna close. So grow, play board games.
Oh, no.
Lockdown, grow, play board games. So in about 40 seconds, we're gonna end our Mentimeter poll here.
Someone joined every club in their school. I like that. That's very.
I guess since it's all virtual, you really can be in 2 places at once, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like I go to a lot more public meetings because now they're just a lot easier to just kind of pop into. Oh.
All right, our voting has closed, so I
All
stopped
right.
sharing, so you can start sharing again, Katie.
Okay. So the other question I wanted to ask you, and we're just going to do this in chat because
we
I
could do
would
that
just like
too.
to hear what folks kind of have to say is, why are you here at this school, at this class, I guess, or in this session with Roger, or Dr. Chen, I guess, right? Should be more formal. I would really love to know, like, what brought you into, like, why were you interested? What was the one thing that got you, so that as we kind of talk through it, and you guys can just type those in the chat box so I can see them while we're kind of talking a bit and going through some of the material. That would be helpful. So then I can at least try and talk about things that you're interested in, and help you guide you through this process a little bit as well. It's going to be, as I'll dive into, do I have the right one? Yeah, it should be right again. Yeah.
I don't think,
Am I not sharing?
wait, I might just not be looking all that. It looks like it. Yeah, you have the right one.
Okay. So a little bit about today is that way we kind of structured it is kind of how to help you guys develop a planning approach or process that focuses on planning with the community rather than just for the community, which is frankly something the planning world has kind of done historically, and for your intersection project, right, at South King Street and Eisenberg Street in Honolulu, Hawaii. So we're going to kind of cover a few topics, sort of like, what is planning? What do you do with it? How do you do it well? We're going to do a little bit of praxis, which is applying it to your project. And then we're going to debrief. And then just so you know, is that we have prizes today, correct? Roger, you grabbed them?
That is correct. So there will be gift cards given out to whoever Katie decides is the winner of our little.
Yes.
Event
So
here. Anyway,
for
yes.
basically participation prizes for who comes up with the best ideas during our process today. And I'll let you know when those kind of happen during the entire. But I got to tell you guys, I'm not seeing anything in the chat boxes telling me why you were here. So it's not looking real good right off the bat. So let's just try and go on. So a little bit about, yep, everybody should put in. So we're doing Amazon gift cards. So they should be good for everybody, hopefully.
Yes. They're going to be digital for those who are in American Samoa or CNMI. So I'll have to email you the link, but
yes, they will be made available. We tried to make it so that it was good for everyone. Yeah. All right, so to explore career options. Well, let me tell you more about planning. So I think the first thing to sort of know is that there are different definitions for planning. And it's an constantly evolving field, particularly in the transportation space. You know, we have this first one that is about future policies and goals and investments and the spatial planning for how to move people about. ITE, which was called the Institute for Transportation Engineers. Roger is a member, I'm sure, is a collaborative and participatory process involving agencies, organizations, and the public to look at national, state, and regional and community needs, looking at demographic characteristics and patterns and how those will sort of change over time and try to figure it out. And then, you know, I found this super simple one as well, which is on the public provision and financing of transportation assets, particularly roads and public transit systems. And although they all kind of revolve around transportation systems and perspectives, you know, some are sort of more considered or more concerned with community perspectives and why people are using them than potentially others. But I think it's sort of important to say that there's not like one great sort of accepted definition of planning. And so I think that's actually sort of important. I think it depends on what you're trying to do and what we are trying to achieve as a community. It doesn't necessarily have to be the same everywhere. And so with that question, I want folks to maybe just do some thumbs up. Have you ever participated in a planning or a transportation planning process? Let's see, we'll do this kind of like a little bit via vote. Can you guys put thumbs ups if anybody's ever done it? Anybody?
Okay, wait, Noelle put a thumbs down. I guess there's no thumbs down in Zoom.
Oh, there's thumbs down. So Noelle, can I ask you to kind of chime in about what your experience
there is a thumbs down. Okay, anyway.
Oh, there is.
Noelle, we see you, so you can't hide. Sorry.
I know, or you can put it in the chat, but I'd love to hear more about how you experienced it.
Oh, have I ever participated in
a planning process at all? No.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, I mean, it's so I'm in scanning, and perhaps Roger, you can double check it for me. I am not seeing any takers for this question. So, but what I will guarantee you is that every single one of you have lived in an area that has engaged in a planning process around transportation. It's pretty impossible to not be covered by some sort of transportation plan in the United States and its outlying territories. And in fact, I went and snooped around, and there are some in all the areas people are representing today. I thought for sure someone was going to answer this one, at least yes, that they had gone and tried to, you know, get more sidewalks in their community, or had engaged to work on bike issues, or was just not happy about something in terms of infrastructure investment. Has anybody got that? If you have, throw it in the chat box, or you can chime in verbally if you want to as well. I'm still.
Maybe you didn't know you were part of a transportation planning process, or
yeah,
you were just having a conversation about sidewalks or trees or basketball courts, maybe, I don't know.
Or your school, about what's happening at your school.
Yes.
All right, well, it looks like we've got some blank slates, so we'll have to see how this goes. So I will tell you that I take the perspective, though, of mobility justice, that's sort of what transportation planning should be doing, which is kind of addressing a lot of the challenges that have existed in a lot of our social issues, particularly around civil rights and access to opportunity. And, I think most folks are probably aware that there's been a lot of discussion about this in terms of Black Lives Matters and other topics. Well, within the transportation community, there has also been similar discussions. And so there's this organization called Untokening that has put forward, how to transform, frankly, the transportation planning process. And I've pulled a lot of these things forward from these principles that they've spent a lot of time doing. There are like 16 principles. If you're interested, you can look up Untokening. They've got a great summary. It's not really 10 as far as I could tell. It was more than that. They've been adding to them, but I sort of condensed it down to about about 4 to help us with our process today. But I really do encourage you all to check it out if you are interested in some of the more details and the perspectives. So one of the first things that we kind of look at is identifying problems. And there's a lot going on. And I think if you're starting from this place, you sort of have to acknowledge that transportation, although it has done, someone's coming in. Transportation projects, although in some cases having a lot of benefits, have not been without their harms. So the picture on the right is actually the building of H1, and you can see really clearly how it went through a community. Like everything under that road, there were houses there, and that was someone's home. And although they may have been compensated, which is not a given, they may not have had much of a choice in the matter. And it's understanding that like now to get from one side of that community to another is actually quite difficult. I myself face this regularly in my trip to the office when I was going to the office, of course. But the longest, hardest stretch to really cross is the one over H1 if you're walking or biking. And I think it's really important to think about like what the local needs are, what the transportation options or what a community might want might vary. On the right with H1, there's one set of needs, and on the bottom, right, in a rural community, there might be a very different set of needs. And this is true across all sorts of communities. And I think it's important to sort of not always look for the best practices of things that have worked someplace else, but really make sure that you're responsive to some of these local challenges. And spending the time understanding, identifying problems. On the top left is, I'm trying to remember, this one is, let's see. This one was actually in American Samoa. This is the police station in which someone was killed basically right in this crosswalk over here. And it was, not one of the better options, but, if you were diving into it, you would want to really pay attention to what's happening in this location and under what circumstances and what's really needed for all the folks that are traveling in this area. And a call out for some of our work, we actually did a study about how much it costs to maintain this type of roadway infrastructure. Here in Hawaii, every year, it's about $21.8 billion. So there's a lot of money that goes into these systems and how they end up being sort of constructed. And there's a lot of opportunity. And I think that's really where the transportation planning space is important, is in trying to craft to make sure that those projects sort of align with what communities want. And so to really think about that, if you can't agree on the definition of the problem, then chances are there's going to be a lot of community members that don't agree with your solution. The next one is also a big piece of it and historically has not always been something that transportation planning and transportation industry in general is good at, which is valuing identity and experiences as essential data. Just as you guys are probably going to go out and look at the intersection, at least virtually a bit, and work through those things and sort of the geography of the system, I think it's also to understand that the people using it are essential data for it. How are they using those places? What do they mean to them? What services are they providing? This is an example from Seattle where these are all the different types of people and experiences they try to capture. And I would say is probably a really great list in understanding all the different things and the ways people experience stuff. So for instance, right, if you only focus on a certain type of activity, or a certain type of mobility, like, right, someone who can walk really easily across the street and doesn't have any problems, well, then maybe the solutions don't work for someone pushing a carriage or someone in a wheelchair. Just recognizing that an average experience is probably not comprehensive. Let's see. And okay, so this is sort of a really good graphic example. I apparently kept both slides. I thought there was only one, sorry, but you can kind of see, it's the same distance, but the two different people are really experiencing that entire space very, very differently. And that whatever gets put forward as a design solution, you want to make sure responds to both of them. The next one is really prioritizing people over profit, property, and placemaking. And a lot of this really has to do with some of the things that we've seen over the past 20 years, where there's been these really big investments, maybe in a transit system to help provide access for folks to jobs in communities that really needed it. And then over time, those areas became too expensive for the people that the investment was driven to serve. And really focusing on that. A lot of times in transportation planning, and transportation in general, we focus on like how many vehicles we can move rather than how many people we can move. And really just those little nuances are really important. Another big one is placemaking which is like how to make someplace more inviting to have it come in. Making sure that it's about why people are using it, not just making it pretty in some ways. And then the last sort of principle I would sort of throw out there, or I would say summary of principle, is co-creating new solutions, which is, how can you help support collective cross community power, where people feel invested in both solving the problems, people feel invested in the solutions that get proposed and feel like they're meeting their needs. It's never a guarantee for sure. There will probably always be folks who are never thrilled with the options on the ground and don't necessarily want to have change go through. But I think it's important to try and make it so that you're on the ground with folks who have to live with what you're doing or what you're proposing, and that they are also champions for that work. So that's the high level. I know that was a lot, and we are going to work on applying all 4 of these to your project, but are there any questions or comments? You can either do chat or you can do, oh, I missed the prize number 1. Oops, hold on. Wait, we got to go back. Where's the prize number 1? Where'd it go? It's supposed to be big. Oh, so prize number 1 is for the best verbal or written insight. So whoever comes up with the best statement, as decided by me and Roger at the end, you get a prize. So to help you participate. So starting now. Are there any, I know that's high level and I sort of said a lot, but I did want to open it up for questions. If there was anything you wanted to go back to.
So
yeah.
Katie, am I allowed to interrupt and ask a question? So to all the high school participants, right, we've actually seen examples of all of these in our field trips, especially placemaking. So my question to them is, where have you seen placemaking come into engineering design in some of the field trips that we went to? So we visited the new terminal at H&L, and we visited the HART station at Leeward Community College. Okay.
Remember, guys, prizes.
Well, I didn't say how much was on the gift card, right?
Oh, yeah.
So maybe I should put in a number, and that might entice them, but.
And we have 3, just 3, right? So.
And so far they're gonna go to Noelle because she typed something in the chat window and I made her speak, and then Anna Lou who said she would want to explore career options.
We got to chat with what was the question for the ASG DPW folks.
Oh, well, my question was, what were some examples of placemaking that we saw in our field trips? Right. All right, Katie, I think we're just gonna get crickets.
It was worth a shot, right?
Yeah.
So
Well, so remember at the airport, we had all of those sort of indications of Hawaiian placemaking, right? So they had at the bathroom stalls, they had dressed up the figures in these sort of like outfits. So Katie, I don't know if you've seen that or not. And then
I have
also,
not been out to that one yet. So
and then at the heart station, they had a few sort of markings that were indicative of that area. So those were
yeah.
two examples. Anyway, sorry to.
Yes, you can
Yes,
definitely.
you can do that. So what are examples of placemaking in American Samoa?
While they're doing that piece, because I don't want to move ahead, I think, heart is actually a good example of trying to pay a little bit attention to space and place and the history, right? I mean, there's been a pretty significant investment in making sure that there were Native Hawaiian names to go with the stations over time that reflected each of those smaller communities. And I wouldn't say, I'm certainly not going to get into the details of like heart and everything else, but I think that's one example. Like that one activity I think is particularly noteworthy in that they were trying to sort of reflect. And for those of you that don't know that, like some of the history behind heart, a lot of the stations, they're actually meant to make sure that there's a cover in every single one of the historic neighborhood number designations, which I'm going to mess up the name of these because I can never get it right. So the ahuapua that are done, yeah, see, I can't do it. If I can't read it, I'm really bad at saying anything in Hawaiian. But essentially each one of the stations is meant to reflect being able to connect all of those along the southern shore too. That was one of the criteria. And so there isn't really one that's like skipped or anything like that. So, okay. I don't know if we're gonna get a placemaking here in American Samoa, but we'll just keep on going. So we're gonna kind of try and do a few activities together on applying those 4 principles. So we're gonna walk through each one and kind of like see if we can figure out, and it involves maybe you guys getting on computers and looking at different types of things and responding in chats. So we'll see. So one of them is that we're going to go to where the intersection is, and I'm going to pull it up on my screen too so we can toggle out of this, but we're going to go look at the location, right? The intersection, and we're going to kind of talk about or see like are there harm and structural barriers that need to be addressed that you guys can work on in your projects? What are some of the other problems? Are there local needs that we can determine? And prize number 2 is for if you can find a great community group from the maps that you think would be someone that we should talk to during this process. So I think this is actually on the second slide, but we'll just go with it for right now. So I apparently got cut and pasted on accident. So, all right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop. Can everybody go to Google Earth? Or you can do Google. You can go to Google Maps if you're not. Let me get mine up though.
So Katie, while they're doing that, can you give examples of what you mean by community group?
I think anybody who's sort of in this particular case, like living in this community, or someone who is working in this community. So nearby, like, is there, do they have a building? Do they have a location there? I think those are the types of places, or, certain types of neighborhood groups. I think kind of just keeping an eye on who are the people that live in this area that are going to be the users of your designs, right? And kind of start trying to figure out who those people are. So, all right, I will share this screen now. Okay. I forgot to set this up before we did this, but so for those of you that haven't used it, you can basically put in, see, I was already on it once before, and it will take you to this location. Oh, yeah, thank you for adding in the Google Earth link. So here we are, and it's lovely. It's moving around. So, oh, there we go. We are right here. This is our intersection. So what are you guys seeing? Like, who are the folks here on the ground? What are some of the things that, you know, are in this intersection that you would want to deal with? And we can sort of look a block or two in either direction without going too crazy. Does anybody see anything? Can you guys put it in the chat box? Like, what are some of the groups or people that you would want to talk to? And you can do this on your own. Like, I'm just kind of snooping around. But baseball players, yeah, I mean, that's definitely like all the folks who are using this park here, this stadium park. That's definitely going to be a large constituency. Yep, people working in the area. I think it's also maybe drilling in a little bit more, Noel, which is like at what locations. Let's see if we can see what some of these are right here. It's not telling me, so we'll go to another layer. Let's put the labels in. So yeah, like people who work at Moped Doctors or Toritan or employees of the bank. Yep. Let's see, who else have we got? You know, there's a lot of takeout restaurants, it looks like. So presumably, right, a lot of these folks that work in the food service industry. Let's see, what else have we got over here? I mean, would you think that you are going to have folks who are different users of each one of these parks? Because this one is definitely like a sports oriented park, whereas this looks to be a little bit more kind of community parkish without as much programming. So you probably want to hit both of them. The bicyclists, yeah, we've definitely got a few Beaky stations here as well. I don't know if you guys can see this here, but you probably have already come across this, right? Here's the protected bike lane. Did you guys go through that one, Roger?
Yes, we rode through it.
Oh yeah, yeah. I know it'd be nice if there was a little bit more green paint all over the place, I'm sure. So let's see what else we got. So did anybody find any community groups that are worth talking to? I did, but I'm curious if you guys did. Anybody? Let's try it. So I would definitely talk to the Japanese Cultural Center of Hawaii. They probably have quite a lot. There's also this Honolulu Chinese Church Alliance. These would be folks who probably have a lot of, we usually call them like ambassadors, like people who can sort of bridge that gap between you and a community, you know, and who might live by, because, right, there's also all this, we're going to scroll out a little bit. There's all this residential up over here, and I would assume they're all users. There's a lot of residential kind of over here and a little bit back in here. And you know, a lot of times community organizations like this, even if they aren't, you know, where they don't know everybody in the neighborhood, they do have a really good sense of, you know, of a lot of the folks who are active in the community. So, you know, you want to keep an eye out for those types of things, particularly religious organizations. They usually do a lot in their localized communities. So, yeah, I think we got an answer. The baseball team or certain groups of baseball players that are directly impacted by the street design, they most certainly could be. Or that they are just a really large community presence and really have an understanding. Maybe some of them live in the neighborhood, maybe some of them don't. But, you know, they're definitely going to be users of all of this kind of stuff. So when we talk about some of the problems, have you guys done any work on this where you've kind of started to figure out some of that stuff? Do you think there are problems accessing some of these community areas? Anybody? I'm sure that's actually probably how the problem's been defined, right? Right?
Yeah, I mean, so we did visit it a few times, and then the camp counselors led them on a tour of it a few times as well. So certainly, I think the group has identified a few problems.
Okay. I mean, I would say that like there's probably a good chunk of it. Like if you look at it from this place, like, and this is probably a little bit of like predisposition because of the issues I work on, but some of the things I noticed right off the bat, there's a lot of parking all over the place. Like this is a big lot. You have a lot of these little lots. And so, you know, for a community that's maybe really interested in having better local services, these are all going to be a little bit challenging to that. I mean, I'm sure you guys identified this is a pretty wide road. And it's probably got a lot of speeding issues if I had to guess. I mean, I've driven it, so I do actually know that to be true. But even outside of that, like the sheer number of lanes, you know, is going to probably contribute to higher vehicle speeds than you are going to get as posted, right? Like this is, I think, 25, maybe 35, and you will definitely get people going a lot faster than that. And that accessing both of these parks is actually somewhat challenging a little bit, right? Like if you say you weren't a baseball player, but you lived on this side, well, you'd want to come over here and, you know, the cycle, this might be difficult to just cross, especially if you have mobility issues. So I think those are some of the big ones. Obviously you have the big H1 up here, but that's a little far for your purposes. I'm trying to see if there's anything else. No, but just trying to pay attention to some of these issues. There's not enough bike lanes or bike safety factors. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, I mean, you guys experienced that, right? Like, so that practice that you went through of doing the site visit, going on the ground, I mean, that's a way of becoming one of the users that might be in this community for sure. Yeah. So, okay, so let's go. So let's see, the best community group. Oh, these are going to be tough. We're gonna have to talk about this at the end, Roger.
Okay.
We did get some responses. I think that's valuable, guys. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Francis.
So, all right. So next up, let's switch this over. We might come back to that. I can't remember now, right? So, okay, let's press now. Ah! Now I can't get out of this. Hold on. There we go. Sorry. My computer has decided to freeze a bit. All right, there we go. Okay. So we kind of covered this a little bit, you know, in our discussions, which is, you know, who lives here now and how do we engage with them? Who used to live here and what changes has this community already seen? And do you want to switch over to Google Docs so we can do some brainstorm? Preliminary.
Yeah, we can. So actually, I'm just gonna put in a link to the shared Google document for Katie's module here. And let me just give me a minute to copy the link, and I'm gonna put it here in the chat window.
And okay, and I'll actually pull that up too. We'll just work in it.
I'm going to. So if we're all in the Google document right now, right? See, a lot of people have logged on. So Katie, I put in as the first prompt, given these definitions, what do you want to know about the planning, or transportation planning? What does it mean to you?
Yeah, I think it was from earlier. But I think let's focus on the ones. So here, I'll copy and paste them real fast.
Okay. Yeah, you're welcome to edit it as well.
So we can just pull it in. So, I'll tell you, this is lots of transportation planning is sometimes on the fly too, right?
Yeah.
at least when you're doing facilitation. So, all right. So who used to live here? Oh, who lives here now, and how do we engage with them? And who used to live here? And oh, I didn't get all of it. And what changes?
Okay, I'll delete this then.
Yeah, I think we were going to do it earlier, and I missed the prompt. Someone let me do it now. There's so many people working in it now. It's not. Ah! You guys participating so much that now I can't seem to get anything in here. Okay. So if you guys were gonna sort of think about it, like how would you engage with the folks who live there? Do you guys have any suggestions or ideas? What would you do to go find out what's going on with them?
So I just retyped the prompt, right? So somebody says talk to people on the street.
Yeah, so doing, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Which is something I always tease them about. I'm going to have them go out with their smartphones and talk to the people we run into there and ask them what they're doing.
I mean, you should. You will find out a lot. Sometimes people won't talk to you. I will 100% tell you that will happen. A lot of times what will also happen is that people will do pop-ups, right? So maybe you go to the edge of one of those parks, you put up a tent and you sort of say, hi, I'm working for so-and-so, would love to talk with you a little bit about your experiences and some of the challenges you face in this area from a transportation perspective. That's a fairly typical.
So Francis from American Samoa says, I would hold a community meeting.
All right. Well, how are you going to go about the community meeting? How are you going to get people to show up? Let's see what else. So I try and communicate with people in the area too. Yeah. Oh, good job. Give them situations. Enter stores and establishments. I'm just letting you all type for a bit, so we'll probably give you
we'll give you a few minutes.
But I am thrilled you're all typing, so keep it up. So and think like how, say you were one of those workers, right? And you traveled through that area, or you were trying to get there and live someplace else. What would you, how would you want to engage with someone on this type of question? What if you were one of the baseball players? What if you, I don't know, did Tai Chi in the park? That's always a big one, at least in my neighborhood. So let's see. Yeah, enter stores and establishments. Yeah, we do that pretty regularly. You kind of go walk all the property owners. What if the property owners or the people, what if the people who own those properties are closed or they don't live there? How do you find them then? This is a really common problem. Like, how do you talk to the folks at the CVS when CVS is, or Longs? Sorry, it's called Longs here. This is a real common problem. Like, when people don't live in the neighborhood and it's sort of an absent property owner. And I'm more just giving you guys food for thought. I'm not actually expecting you to solve this problem because half the time we can't solve it sometimes. So, but yeah, enter stores and establishments, talk to people, ask them about what they're thinking, set up times at a better time. Don't go during, don't go to the takeout place during dinner time pickup, go at off hours and stuff like that. A big part of what they sort of talk about is meeting the community where they're at and not, imposing or expecting them to bring more to the table than they can bring. Maybe put out notices. Yeah. Okay. So Francis says, I would hold a community meeting. We can give them situations that are going to be discussed. Yeah, that's great. Honestly, that's a really important tool. I would say a lot of times people get asked the question to like, well, what do you think of this solution? Right. And it's like one design, it's one option. You need to give people choices. They are not the technical experts and they're not going to be, and they're not going to be in a time frame that works. And if you can give them options about what they would prefer, then you can really tease out how they feel about it. This is something I fight with all the time, actually, as an non-government person, which is that the question sometimes has a tendency to be like, do you approve of this? Rather than like, here's a solution that balances the bike infrastructure or bicyclists and maximizes that space versus the one in which we prioritize vehicle speed and vehicles coming through, right? Give real choices. That's an excellent suggestion. Let's see. Michael, I would like to engage this community through the media and encourage them to discuss more issues with research. Putting a lot of flyers and advertisements online can raise great alertness. The issue can be solved more quickly if there's more people willing to solve it. Yeah, I mean, that's really true. I think one of the things to be really like using a lot of different mediums to engage people. Some people only like to be now reached out through online. Others, you will only get them at meetings, you know. One of the things that we've sort of discovered during the pandemic is the success of online meetings. The last one I attended as a participant had 300 people. That is not a number you normally get pre-pandemic times. Like that's a huge, anything over, I don't know, like 50 is usually really big. And so, you know, now that is a new opportunity, but keep in mind that some people aren't going to be online. And you don't want to, you know, forget about them. And really that you have to explore a lot of different options to do this sort of properly. The issue can be solved more quickly if there are more people willing to contribute. I think the one thing to really sort of, this is 100% true. And the more you can share that process with people and have them really be a part of it, rather than sort of saying, I just need your opinion on the subject, the better off you are. You know, when we talk about co-creating like solutions, you have to go in with a lot more humility than is maybe normal in the past. I think the one thing to realize though is that nobody is getting paid for this work in the community for the most part. Some people are, right? But asking people to devote a lot of time and energy to something when they're raising kids, when they've been working jobs, sometimes more than one, when they're taking care of parents, when they're older, when they're younger, you know, and I think you guys can probably relate to this a little bit as well, is you got to be real careful with that because that's a burden on those community members. So to the extent that you can, you know, value that, in some cases compensate them for it, make it easier for people to show up and be there for the project. You know, that is something that it's very difficult to do. Let's be honest, it's very difficult to do. But it is something that's always worthwhile to really try and do to the best of the ability on your projects. Let's see, what else do we got? Give out incentives to people who participate in meetings and discussions. Well, whatever do you mean? You mean prizes?
Incentives? What?
Yes, no, that's definitely true. That is something that has probably been underutilized, broadly speaking, in this country is, you know, and sometimes it doesn't even have to be incentives. It can just be providing dinner. Like you're coming during your dinner time. We are going to feed you, you know. Some places will do childcare, right? You know, if you need to come, lots of folks can't do it because they don't have people to watch their kids. That's another one. How would they get you guys to meetings? Like what would motivate you to participate in something like this? Let's see, what else we got? Set up a website for comments, hold online calls from. Yeah, no, these are all really great ideas.
I would go if they had food. Well, I have food every time for our in-class modules. But I guess
I don't know, maybe they're not hungry enough, but you're too well fed. No, I'm joking. No, I mean, I don't know. I would go when I was in college for free food. That would get me to a lot of places, but it's been a while. I still show up for free food sometimes. So, and I think sort of just going back to our questions, right? You know, here's a question, right? So there was what was the organization? If you were going to brainstorm a way of like engaging everybody who was sort of associated with the Japanese Cultural Center of Hawaii, like let's just focus in on them a little bit. Like what are some of the ways that you would want to have them sort of engaged? Any ideas? Oh, let me get back to the, where'd it go? There it is. So I think you guys hit on some of them already, which is just go and talk to them, find out what, some of the challenges are, but it could turn out that they are holding a community fair, right? Or they have so many groups that come through there, like community members, like maybe they have an Aikido group that uses their facilities every Tuesday. And maybe they have, like tea ceremonies. I'm trying to think of like cultural practices that might be there. Anybody else have suggestions? So, those types of things, that you can build off of and reach out to their memberships, reach out to those community members who are already showing up for things, right? They're already there. And how do you make it so that they can participate? Advertise in the garden and make it appealing. Yep. I think that's another great idea, and at least here in Honolulu, which is not true everywhere, but is always a good thing, there are actually neighborhood boards for every square inch of this island, which are sort of very localized organizations that you can reach out to. So